everyone. I am Jan Blanchard with PCC's Pediatric Solutions Consulting team, and it is my distinct honor today to introduce to you Alex Meyer, MBA. He is a member of that very same team, and I get to introduce him today in his role, not as host to some of the UC 2020 sessions, as you may have seen him recently, but as the presenter. Without further ado, I am going to turn things over to Alex.
Wonderful, thank you. Let me get my slides shared here, and we'll get rolling. Exciting, as Jan mentioned, it's the last session before the big bash tomorrow, so make sure you show up for that. That'll be a great time. I'm really excited about this presentation because I think it's a really good topic to end the UC on and bring us forward as we continue encountering the changes due to COVID and all the craziness that goes on. Having high performance teams, having a good team ethic within your practices is going to be so helpful as we go forward. So I'm really excited to get to talk about this, and particularly to kind of cap off the users conference, leaving you with something I think you can really make good use of going forward. So let's dive on in. Today we are talking about building high performance teams and what those look like and what that means. Our goal today, we're going to talk a bit about what a high performing team looks like. We're even going to start a little bit behind that on what is a team anyway and why do you want them. We're going to talk about how you form high performance teams and what's involved in doing that. And then we're going to talk about how you can help your team improve, and particularly a technique I've used in teams in the past to drive team improvement, process improvement, all together, all kind of wrapped in one, that I found super helpful and super useful in the past. So we'll take you through what that looks like and how you can implement that with your teams and in your practice. First off, I want to step all the way back and talk a little bit about what drives your success in your practice. There's been a lot of research done, and one of the key findings on that is that organizations with employees that they would consider thriving are most likely to be successful themselves. And what does thriving mean? It's an interesting word for it, it's a good word, I like it. And we talk about thriving with children and your patients and raising thriving children. What does that really mean? There's kind of two components of that. Vitality, being alive, passionate, excited, sparking energy is really one portion of thriving kids or thriving employees and thriving practices. And learning, that growth, the new knowledge, acquiring new skills, building expertise and confidence, really the other half of creating thriving children, thriving employees, and thriving practices. There are really four main mechanisms that we can use in practice to encourage employees to thrive and to help them thrive and build that culture. And so we're going to walk through those right off the bat here to kind of set the foundation for where we're going. I do want you to pay close attention as we go through them. After we talk about these mechanisms, we're going to get into teams and what a team is and how they work. And there's a ton of overlap between what makes employees thrive and what makes a good team. So you're going to see what we talk about echo throughout the rest of the presentation. So keep an eye on it. The very first mechanism that encourages thriving employees is decision-making discretion. The ability to make decisions that impact one's work gives people a greater sense of control over their environment. Isn't this why a lot of you went into independent practice? More control over how you practice medicine, how you see patients, how you run your practice. That sense of control that you want, your employees appreciate as well. They want some freedom and some agency to make real decisions about their work, influence the outcome, and influence what they're doing. Obviously, they don't own the practice, you do, so not every decision is one that your employees will be able to make, but within the scope of their roles and their jobs, they want some ability to influence that and create their own fate and their own path. So that's a really important part of helping employees to thrive. It also gives employees the chance to make mistakes and learn from them and keep growing personally and professionally. Again, like we encourage parents to allow children to make some mistakes so they can learn and try new things, that doesn't stop when you stop being a kid. Professionally, that's still important. Having a chance and having room to make mistakes, learn, grow, that's all super important. So how can you put this into practice? Focus on giving your employees the space to solve problems. Do you have an issue in particular that your practice needs to solve? Perhaps it's taking too long to get patients into rooms. In that case, gather the employees who are involved in the process of leading up to rooming a patient. Talk about the issue with them, explain what's going on, explain what the issue is, and then let them brainstorm ideas to fix it and come up with what's going on and better understand that problem. Let them choose which ideas to try first and decide how they want to assess that improvement. How do they know it's working or not? Let them come up with that and then follow their lead. It's a great way to let them have some agency in solving those problems and take ownership of that. And that gives them helps them thrive and helps them feel good. There's a huge, again, amount of interplay here with the characteristics of a team. We'll get into it in a little bit, with common purposes and performance goals and all of that. So this is really a key part of building a team as well, and we'll get into that more in a little bit. The second mechanism is around sharing information. If you're going to give your employees the discretion to make decisions, they need to have the information necessary to make good decisions. So you need to make sure you share the context of their role and their work. What outside factors might they not fully understand? What else is going on in the practice that they might not be aware of? And how do you know something is important? What makes it important to you? How can they tell it's important? Ultimately, this is about connecting their role to the overall success of the practice. Where does their work fit overall? Who depends on them to do their job? What happens when something goes wrong? What happens when they do an amazing job? All this stuff plays together and helps them find their place and part of your practice's larger mission and understand what's going on. There's a really famous story of JFK touring NASA during the lead up to the moon landings and during the Apollo program that illustrates this. JFK walks by a janitor with a broom sweeping away, and he asks him what he's doing. Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon. It's that sort of feeling of commitment to the mission for everybody in the organization that you're looking for. That janitor, even though they're just sweeping floors, that has an impact on the ability of NASA to put a man on the moon. So everybody in your practice needs to understand what they're doing and how it fits into the larger picture. It's also important to share both the good and the bad news. When something good happens, people like to share it, make it public, highlight the people who played the role in making that happen. Did you have a great day of seeing patients? Just tell the staff who are involved, front desk all the way on through. When something less good happens, you gotta let people know that as well. Not to blame them, but to keep them informed. Talk about what either you're doing to fix it or brainstorm with them, how they can all be involved in fixing something and how to avoid those issues in the future. But again, encouraging the collaboration and the working together helps make employees feel involved and engaged in that process. And the more knowledge and context they have, the easier it is for them to make good decisions that benefit your practice and make them happier and more productive. Our third mechanism is promoting civility. Almost anyone can think of a time when feedback was given in an unconstructive way. They were yelled at, berated, belittled. And how did that feel? Did it motivate you to do better? Is that how you counsel parents to give feedback to their children? Of course not. So don't do it to your employees and don't tolerate it between your employees. Push and promote civility in the workplace for everybody. It is what allows employees and everybody there to feel safe to try new things, to make mistakes, and to learn. As we talked about before, learning is a key part of thriving, and thriving employees need a thriving practice. Outside of giving constructive civil feedback to employees, it's also important to consider the venue for that feedback. Positive feedback is really good in public, where people can see it and employees' peers can see that. People like praise and they like to have their peers know that. Keep in mind the personality of the employee. You may not want to stand them up in front of your entire practice if they're a shy, quiet, reserved sort of person. That might be better in email, but make sure that the people who the employee work with know that they're doing a good job and that you think they're doing a good job. Negative feedback, particularly strongly negative feedback, may be better given in private, where the employee has a chance to understand, ask questions, process it, work through it without feeling like they're under the spotlight of all their peers at the same time. So, be careful about what venues you're using. Really, promoting civility throughout your workplace is a key part of building a strong culture. It's vital to building success and high performance teams. Teams are going to have conflicts. They need to be able to work through those conflicts, and they need to be professional and constructive when they do so. That way the team is strengthened in the process. And when you have people being, acting uncivilly to each other, yelling, screaming, insulting, anything like that, that really hampers that effort. So whatever you can do to promote civility in your practice is going to go a long way. Finally, our fourth mechanism is providing feedback, which we talked about a little bit in civility, because how you do that is important. But employees without any sense of how they're doing and where they could improve are just wandering around in the dark. So be sure to monitor performance for everyone. Teams have performance goals, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. Employees definitely need performance goals, and they need to be something they can influence. For example, if your goals for a scheduler is to schedule 20 patients per hour, but you only have the patient demand for 15 patients per hour, they're never going to be able to meet that measure, and there's nothing they can do about it. If they're not involved in getting patients in the door or to schedule appointments, how are they going to meet that? That's outside of their control, and it's not a great measure for them. So make sure you find one that matches and that they have influence over. And many of the good measures for providing that ongoing feedback can be public in some way. Again, kind of matching that sharing of information. As long as people are being civil and constructive, you can share a lot of those performance measures with the rest of the practice, so people elsewhere understand what's going on in different parts of the practice and understand the context that they're working in. Again, it requires that civility that we just talked about. Everybody needs to be able to be professional and kind and respectful when they give feedback, when they talk to people. So as you can see, all four of these mechanisms work together, and they promote thriving employees by giving them ample opportunities to learn, be engaged, be excited in their work. And really, they flow directly into the characteristics of teams. So let's take a look at those. We're going to start kind of back a little bit. What is a team? That is a term that gets used all the time, and people don't always know really what it means and what to do with it. A team is not just any group. There are committees, there are councils, there are task force. They're not necessarily teams. An entire organization, your entire practice is rarely a team, maybe multiple teams, maybe a group, but you're rarely a full team. Teams differ from groups in a few ways. They require both individual and mutual accountability. They produce results through the joint contributions of their members, and they are greater than the sum of their parts. A really good quote out of a Harvard Business Review article on this. A team is a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, set of performance goals, and approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Let's take a look at each of those individually and understand kind of what they mean as far as teams go. Common purpose. The essence of a team is this commitment to a common purpose, something that all the team members can believe in and work towards. Most purposes are formed based on demand, either from management of the organization, the practice, or from some other opportunity or situation that the team encounters. Management in general is responsible for defining a team's charter and the rationale. Why are they there? What's the purpose? But management and whoever's leading or overseeing that team must also leave enough flexibility and leeway for the team to develop their own specific goals, timing, and approach. That's where we start to get, that team aspect of it. Let's talk about a couple quick examples here, and we're going to come back to these examples on each characteristic as we go through and see how they apply. So a billing team, for example, they may have the purpose of achieving complete payment for services rendered by the practice. The practice partners, on the other hand, may have a common purpose to build a practice that matches their mission. And a clinical team may have a goal to increase the number of patients that can be seen per day without decreasing quality. Each of these are totally fine common purposes, different teams with different missions, different goals. Speaking of goals, that common purpose must be broken down into specific goals. This is how the team measures its progress and focuses its efforts. They help lend a sense of urgency to the team. Achieve X by Y date. It's a deadline, it's a timeline, gets people working towards something specific. The goals also help level the playing field among the team members. Achieving those goals are paramount for the success of the team. And that is regardless of the team member's position elsewhere or otherwise in the organization. And this is really particularly important if the partners and non-partners are on a team together, or if doctors and nurses are on a team together where there is perhaps a real or perceived hierarchy. That focus on goals means the hierarchy doesn't matter. It's how are we furthering our progress on the goals? And so keeping the eye on those goals is really important. The goals should follow the SMART principles. If you aren't familiar with those are that goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, time-bound, and relevant. And you should also make sure to spell them right and set them in the correct order, which I did not. There's a ton of research and a ton of writing out there for SMART goals. I'll leave you to go do the research and find out that there's so much, but they are super powerful in making sure that when you set targets for yourself, there's something that you can actually accomplish and, again, hold yourself accountable to. Let's take a look at examples for those three teams that we talked about before. The billing team, they may set the goal to improve the automatic claim payment rate from 95% to 98% by the end of the year. The practice partners may set the goal to increase patient population by 3% each quarter. And the clinical team may look to reduce the time that a family waits in the room for vaccines to less than 1 minute by the end of the quarter. Note that each of these are specific. They talk exactly what they need to be. There's something that can be measured so you know how you're doing against it. They're reasonable. They're something you can attain. They're related and relevant to their overall purpose. And they all have a time-bound portion. They all have, by the end of the year, each quarter, end of the quarter, some date by which they need to be done. Third characteristic here is complementary skills. The common purpose and the SMART goals only get you so far. The team has to have the right skills to succeed. Particularly, they need the technical and functional expertise to do the work. They need the problem-solving and decision-making skills to understand what's going on, do analysis, and decide their path forward. And they need the interpersonal skills to navigate the conflict that will inevitably emerge during their work. Teams rarely have all of the skills when they are formed. They often need to develop them over time, work on them, learn as they go. That's fine. A lot of selecting who should be on the team and everything is looking at potential and who has the potential to learn the skills they need to do. So again, a quick look at our three teams and examples and what sort of skills they might each need to accomplish their goals and fulfill their purpose. That billing team that's trying to make sure everything gets paid, they need knowledge of the payer requirements and proper coding for claims. They need the ability to analyze their existing claims and payment data to understand why some claims aren't being paid the first time. And they need the skills of working through the changes that people throughout their organization are going to need to make, throughout the practice are going to need to make to ensure that the claims are paid that first time. Do the doctors need to code differently? Does somebody in billing need to change a setting somewhere? People all over the place are going to have to make changes, and they need to be ready to communicate them. The partners are going to need someone with knowledge of marketing to new families to increase patient count. They need the ability to analyze why families join and leave the practice. And they need skills, again, for communicating among the partners who are all busy and focused on patient care, and they need to be able to coordinate what changes need to get made for that. Finally, that clinical team, knowledge of the overall visit flow and the process for preparing and administering vaccines is going to be really important. The ability to analyze the existing process and identify where they can improve and what opportunities they have for that is going to be key to them, speeding up the handoff from physician to vaccination. And again, just like the other ones, they're going to need the skills to communicate the changes that people throughout the practice, from nurses and doctors, anywhere, are going to need to tighten up that vaccine administration process. Now, purpose, goals, skills, they all lay the foundation, but you do have to actually do the work. The team has to get stuff done for this to be beneficial. And so the teams must commit to a common understanding of how work will get done on the team. Who is going to do which jobs? How will schedules be set? What skills need to be developed? How will the team make and modify decisions? How is continued membership on the team earned? We all have that group project experience where 2 people did all the work and the third person slacked off and just signed their name on the end. In really successful teams, that isn't tolerated. And so if you want to stay on the team, you need to keep earning your place. Most importantly, the team needs to agree on the answers to these. There needs to be a common understanding of those. Finally, if any of this real work is delegated to just a few members, and the team is only doing reviews and the meetings, that team is going to fall apart because, again, everybody isn't committed doing the work. Even the person who's the highest ranking person on the team hierarchically still needs to have real contributions to the team effort. Let's circle back to our examples really quickly. Our billing team, perhaps they decide that they're going to meet daily to review the rejected claims from the previous day, identify the best change they can make to try to improve. The partners, each partner may be responsible for asking the families they see each day why they chose this particular practice to see, to help them better understand why families choose them or why they didn't choose another office, which helps them understand how to attract more patients. And the clinical team may have each member of the team responsible for bringing 3 ideas for how to reduce the time families wait in the room for vaccine to a brainstorming session so they can figure out how they want to try to tackle that problem. So the 4 characteristics we just covered really form the foundation of the team. Why does it exist? What is it trying to achieve? Does it have the tools it needs to succeed? And how will it get the work done? The final piece relates to how the team is held accountable for doing that work. How do we know it's going to get done? Most people are familiar with the idea that the boss holds people accountable to getting the work done. But what if there's no boss? If the team is the group of partners? Or what if all the different team members have different bosses? Say you have a team that has somebody from the front desk and one of the nurses and somebody out of the billing department and one of the employed physicians all working on a problem. They all have different bosses. There is no single boss or a single manager who can hold the entire team accountable in the hierarchy. So instead of relying on one or more bosses to hold the team accountable, these successful teams hold themselves accountable for getting the work done. They hold each other accountable. And that foundation, those 4 areas we just talked about, they form a social contract among the team members that allows them to keep working forward and keep each other in check. Most importantly, the process of identifying the common purpose, performance, goals, skills, and forming that commitment to work is what forges that mutual accountability. It's what creates that social contract and brings everybody on board so they can be committed and focused to the mission, to the team's goal. The other 4 examples that we talked about, have examples. This mutual accountability piece doesn't lend itself well to examples, or the billing team does this and the partners do that. But instead, it's really comes out of the formation of a shared culture among the team members and the commitment to living up to the expectations of themselves and their fellow team members. That really contributes to the ultimate success of that team, and that really spans across all sort of types of teams. If those 5 characteristics aren't present, you don't have a team, you have a group. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There are plenty of tasks that do not require a fully formed team. Steering committees, councils, task force, they're not necessarily teams and are still able to fill a very vital role. The slide here, I'm not going to go through in detail, but shows some of the differences between teams and groups and what differentiates them. Again, neither is necessarily better or worse than the other. They have their place and they have their pluses and minuses. Teams take a lot more work to put together and make to be high performing. You may not need that. Working group maybe just all you need. All right, now we have a better sense of what makes a team a team. Let's look at a few broad types of teams, their missions, how their goals influence the way they work. Some teams exist to make recommendations, others to make or do something, and yet others to run things. The functions of each of these teams drives how it operates, and each type needs different emphasis as it forms. Let's start with the teams that make recommendations. These are often the task forces, project groups, audit, quality, safety groups that are studying problems. And notably, they typically have predetermined completion dates. Their recommendations are due by a certain date. As a result, it is critical that these teams get off to a fast start. They need a strong charter with a clear description of who is expected to participate, what the time commitment is, what the outputs are right from the get-go so they can hit the ground and get moving because the clock is ticking from day one. They need to plan for the handoff of their recommendations at the end. They're making recommendations, but they're not doing the implementation. So their recommendations, in order to be useful, need to be ready to be handed off to somebody. So they need to involve the people who will carry out that implementation early and throughout the process so that when it comes handoff time, that's smooth. In a pediatric practice, quality improvement task force is a good example. As that might have the mission to investigate issues with vaccine inventory discrepancies and recommend changes to the practice to ensure accurate inventory, something like that. Those may fall under this umbrella. Next style of team is the team that makes or does something in particular. These are often the frontline teams that do manufacturing, development, marketing, sales, etc. within any organization. In your pediatric practices, you're looking at the billing team, the nurses, the front desk teams, the physicians, and those folks who are, day to day doing the work of the practice. This work is very often ongoing without any specific end date, which is a contrast to those that make recommendations. A couple exceptions to that no end date. If you have a team that's working on launching a new service, maybe you're doing behavioral health or something like that, you've got a group of people in the practice working on that. You're looking at merging with another practice, so some of the partners are working through that, or you're looking to move locations, anything like that. Those have end dates on them. So some of those pieces from making recommendations may be helpful here to get everybody running, get everything moving. What really becomes important for these teams that make or do something is identifying those critical delivery points within your practice and focusing your team efforts there. So a couple common areas would be the front desk workflow, your rooming and visit workflow, billing workflows. Right now during COVID-19, particularly because this is all changing rapidly, the check-in and rooming workflows, and focusing on teams that are involved in that and making sure those work well. And you can have that, the performance of a team and having that involvement can really have a big impact in those areas. The importance of this, this continually delivering stuff and continually performing their function really brings the performance of the team to the forefront. By focusing relentlessly on the team performance, monitoring progress towards the goals, training, all of that, these teams have a chance to improve a lot over time and get better and better and better and better at what they do. And it also helps to ingrain the connection between good teamwork and the achievement of high performance, both the team that's involved and the practice as a whole. Finally, our third team style is those teams that run things. Your mind may immediately go to the partners of the practice as the team that runs things, but really they can exist at any level in the practice, depending on the size. The partners might form a team. The practice could also have an operations team that consists of the front desk manager, the practice manager, nurse manager, and a few others. But what's really important here is the teams don't necessarily need to match the organizational hierarchy. In the operations team that I just talked about, a physician may or may not be a partner in the practice. They could be an employed physician. Partner would obviously be a higher in the hierarchy than pretty much everybody else on the team. But if their skills and perspective are needed, then they have a role on that team, and a role that is equal to the other team members. The key is to follow those 5 characteristics of a team that we looked at earlier. And here in particular is the need for the complementary skills. You're pulling a bunch of different people who need to have skills that all fit together to further the team's purpose. It's also worth considering, kind of as I mentioned before, whether the team approach is the right approach. Building that high performance team is a lot of work, and sometimes you just need individual work product from everybody that needs a little bit of coordination, and a task force or a working group might be sufficient for that. It's really best decided on a case-by-case basis, look at your need and figure out what works best. You can always kind of adjust as you go. One kind of example or way to consider the difference between a team versus working group approach is think about is through the lens of compensation models for partners. One of the spectrum, you have practices that operate 100% eat what you kill. Everybody makes what they make. There's really no coordination. And that doesn't encourage a lot of common purpose or mutual accountability. So the partners might run the practice more kind of like a working group where each partner is responsible for some particular area, but there's really less common and collaborative work. On the other end of the spectrum, there are the practices that pool all of the revenue and all the expenses, divide everything equally. They're already setting themselves up for that mutual accountability and working together. So, they have that common purpose, they have those shared goals, and a team approach is a natural fit there. And when you really think about it, it's hard to imagine a practice in an eat what you kill model having a strong team culture because everything's so individualized. And I think if you try to put a team culture on a eat what you kill model practice, you'd find it a lot of tension, and either it wouldn't work or you'd find the eat what you kill model being pulled back towards more collaborative. Likewise, if you tried to do the working group piece on a practice that's trying to share everything, you'd struggle because that again would be at odds. So aligning your approaches to your culture and and everything is also really important. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground about what teams are, the types of teams, what makes for a successful, thriving practice. Let's step back and just kind of quickly summarize some of the top characteristics of high-performance teams. These high-performance teams have clear common purpose. They have clear roles and responsibilities, and they have collaborative work and relationships. They also utilize diverse thinking and skill sets. They use constructive conflict management, and they have measurable outcomes and success, so they know when they're doing well and when they need to improve. And teams that successfully achieve these attributes really do have the potential to do amazing things in your practice. All right, so how do these teams come to be? Let's start by taking a look at the stages of team development through the lens of Tuckman's model, which you may have heard of before, you may be familiar with. Tuckman was a pretty well-known group behavioral scientist in the mid-20th century. So you may already be familiar with those stages of forming, storming, norming, performing, and a later addition to that that's less well-known. Even I came across it preparing this slide deck, adjourning. Again, these are all from Tuckman's model of group development, and they really help us understand the journey that a team takes from inception to being a high-performing team. The first stage in a team's development is forming. At this stage, team members are just first coming together as a team. They are likely feeling a combination of excitement and anxiety as they figure out what's going on. They're really at the stage just getting to know each other, and they're looking for the leadership and the authority structure in their team. And so there'll likely be a lot of questions as team members seek to figure out what's going on, where their place is. It's like, what does this team offer me? What does it expect of me? Will I fit in? These are sort of things that each team member is trying to figure out for themselves. The really key output of this forming stage is the definition of the team structure, the goals, and the roles. The decisions made here during this stage are the foundation for the team's work going forward. This is where a really good kickoff process for a new team is really, really important. Establish a common understanding of the team among everybody involved helps get it started on the right foot. Often shortly following the forming stage is the storming stage. This can be a really frustrating and difficult stage of team development for both management and the team members. It's during this stage that the individual personalities start to emerge. People gain enough comfort in the team to open up a little bit. At the same time, while that's happening, the team is likely discovering that the team really isn't going to live up to their initially high optimistic expectations for what they can do and what they can achieve, and they maybe start to become frustrated. So kind of during this phase of storming, the teams may see a drop in both civility, which we talked about earlier is really important, and performance. So as the team members become more frustrated, they may be less respectful to each other, shorter tempers, you may have more conflict, and people who haven't quite figured out how to resolve that conflict civilly yet. And simultaneously, and kind of because of this, the team's likely to see a decline in their overall productivity during this time, as the focus is really turned inward on the team itself and developing and building the relationships rather than accomplishing the goals. Teams can really easily get bogged down here in the storming phase, where they're working to accept their differences and come to a common understanding of their tasks and goals. So it's a good time for leadership and management to help folks through. It can be good to, at this point, to revisit the team's goals, roles, and tasks and make updates to reflect the better understood reality as the team has kind of gotten their hands into stuff a little bit. And that can all help, again, focus back on what is the team doing and away from some of the interpersonal stuff that can come up during this phase. And get the team focused and moving out of the storming phase and into the norming phase. During norming, team members are often, at this point, experiencing increased comfort with themselves, their role in the team, the leadership of the team, their team members. Things are starting to gel. Things are starting to feel good. Getting into that rhythm a bit. Getting more frequent and meaningful communications and conversations among team members. Might start to develop their own language and inside jokes, so it can be a good sign if you see a team you've got going on, they're starting to make jokes, everybody's laughing, and you're like, what the heck are they talking about? That's a good sign. That means they're forming as a team and getting that cohesion, and really it's that cohesion, that unity that you're looking for that starts to bring that team to the next level of performance and really ready to step up. Performance is going to start increasing at this point, as a team can turn its attention away from forming and storming and come up with what is this team anyway, and really focus on tasks and achieving goals. And towards the later ends of the norming phase, a good time to review the team processes and productivity, see how things are going, take a look back, and prepare to kind of really supercharge the team's performance, which can bring them into the performing stage. This is where teams really, really hit their stride. They've gelled. They're feeling satisfied with the progress the team is making. They feel attached to the team, something bigger than themselves. The team performance is high, and the team is making great progress on its goals, cranking away. Everybody feels good. Team members might be shifting fluidly from different roles whenever it's needed, seeing, something needs to get done. I can jump in. I'll take care of that. Everything's good. Everything is just like humming along, well-oiled machine. Obviously, not totally conflict-free. There's always conflict. But at this point, there's enough trust. They have the skills, they have the solidified relationships to quickly and effectively address and resolve conflict and keep cranking away on the work. It would be wonderful for a team to stay in the performing stage forever. There are a couple of things that can kind of knock it out. If you've changed the team members or the external environment around the team has made a significant change, that team may slide back into forming, storming, or norming, and they'll have to work through some of those stages again. But if a lot of the team members have the good skills from the first time through, they can hopefully move through those faster and get back to this performing stage. And the other way is the work the team is doing might come to an end. And that would kind of wrap up and put an end to this performing stage. Let's talk about that a little bit. As the final phase of a team is adjourning. Some of these teams have a mission that comes to an end. Think of those teams that make recommendations. They make the recommendations, they submit them as come, and then they're done. That's it. The work is done. They disband. This time and the time leading up to it can bring a variety of feelings for team members. There's sadness for the loss of the team relationships. There's anxiety about what's next for each member. They may feel satisfaction at the accomplishments that the team has done over this time. And any individual member of the team may feel all of these, none of these, some of these, all at once over time, so it's each individual is going to react differently to this phase in the team. the team's productivity may well drop at this point. Either their workload is diminished, they're wrapping stuff up, or they're becoming a little less focused as they prepare for whatever is next for them. So it's important to kind of keep focused on that, ensure any of the last deliverables are completed. It's a great time to start looking back on the team processes and the result. Identify any lessons that can be learned by your practice, and brought forward into new teams that might have to do something. It's also a great time to have a closing celebration or ceremony to acknowledge the work done by the team. It can really do a good job to provide closure for all the team members before everybody scatters to the winds. So ice cream socials, have everybody out for lunch, cocktail hour, whatever works for the team, whatever works for your practice. In COVID times, cocktail hour on Zoom might be as good as you can do, but something to acknowledge, what people are up to and what they've accomplished. All right, I'll take a quick pause. We've talked a lot about what makes a team and why you would want to encourage them in practice. We've looked at how teams form and evolve over time. Now, let's talk about how you build high-performance teams.
Hey, Alex. As long as you're at a kind of a natural pause, there has been some weirdness with your audio. Oh. And I just want to be sure you're completely understandable, but it's jittery and it's easy for some folks to get distracted by it. So I just wanted to double check that the microphone that you're using is the one that's picking up your voice.
Let's double check.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's gotten a little bit worse over time. It's intermittent, so I didn't even want to try and troubleshoot you in the middle of it.
Where are my controls for that? Let's see.
We'll edit this out and we can do stuff in post-production.
Still have the same microphones here.
Yeah, as soon as you're satisfied, go on ahead.
Yeah, I will keep going. Let me know if it crops back up. I'll pause and we'll see what we can do. I know I'm on because I don't have an Ethernet jack here, so.
Yeah, we've been checking everything in the background, so we'll let you know if we come up with anything good.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. So we're going to talk about how to build high-performance teams. We'll look at the things your practice's partners can do to encourage teams, things human resources folks can do to encourage teams, and things team leaders, like front desk managers, office managers, building managers, nurse managers, etc., can do to encourage teams within your practice. And finally, we look at one specific technique that you can use in your practice to help employees become high-performing teams. In the right place again and change the slides. There we go. So what can the partners do? Your practice partners are your top leaders. The tone and approach that you as partners set trickles down to the rest of the practice and has a profound impact on the culture and behavior of every single person who works there. So it's vital that your partners are intentional about their behavior and how they encourage the growth of teams. One of the most important facets of teams is that team members trust each other. That comes from relationships that form as part of teams. And the more opportunities the employees have to build those relationships with their coworkers, the easier it is for them to form teams when the time is right. So one of the easiest things that partners can do is encourage the creation and building of social relationships within your practice culture. Easy way to do this, buy lunch for the staff once a month. Have that lunch at a time where everybody can congregate and eat together to give people a chance to get to know each other outside of their specific role and build a relationship across their practice so that you can leverage those in the future to make your practice better. As owners of the practice, the partners set the example. If collaboration is going to be an important part of your practice, the partners must model it. So you can model that at the partner level by filling in for each other. If somebody usually takes care of the pep talks and everything, let somebody else do the presentation to the staff this month or whatever, so that people can see, your staff members can see you trading in for each other. It also helps all the partners practice doing all the different things that everybody does, so that if somebody gets hit by a bus, heaven forbid, that somebody else in the practice knows what to do and knows how to pick that up. Finally, employees don't always know how to collaborate, but you can coach them to do that. So one example, one great way to do this, when a new employee joins your practice, set up a schedule for them to meet the other people in the practice. Suggest topics that they talk about with those people so they can understand what's going on. It really provides a threefold benefit. The new employee immediately starts building relationships throughout the practice. The new employee learns more about other aspects of the practice beyond their role. So now they can better understand how what they do fits into the whole practice. And from day one, your employee knows that they are expected and encouraged to talk to other people in the practice and work with them. This models and encourages that collaborative behavior that makes them both more effective and more satisfied and makes your practice thrive. Not every practice is big enough to have a dedicated HR person, let alone a department. But every practice needs somebody who's responsible for those HR tasks. And one of those tasks should really be to think about and encourage the culture the practice wants. Two main things HR can do to encourage teams within the practice are training and community building. On the training front, HR can arrange sessions and training around collaboration skills, conflict resolution, having purposeful conversations, all things that help people work well on teams. And for community building, human resources can arrange events that allow your practice's employees to interact and get to know each other outside the context of their work. For example, host some weekend barbecues, have a women's network within your practice, have other team activities. I know here we at PCC have an annual outing day where everybody goes and does non-work related activities with coworkers. This gives us a really good chance to get to know each other as people rather than just as coworkers. And we get a chance to learn so much about our coworkers and what they do, and it's really, really valuable time. What should team leaders do? Team leaders have a really large role to play encouraging the development of teams. Depending on your size, you may not have distinct team leaders, partners, or sole partner may fill that role, but that's fine. Someone's overseeing employees, and that helps, and they can play that role of team leader. One of the big things you can do is match leadership style to the stage that whatever team you're working with is in. This is talking about the stages: forming, storming, norming, performing that we just talked about. Early in projects and early in teams formation, focusing on tasks and roles is really important, helping a team get dialed in onto what their goals are and how it's held accountable. Later on the projects, particularly during the storming phase, the relationship building aspect and coaching that kind of takes over, making sure that people are working well together. The other approach that team leaders can take that's helpful is you can be pretty direct in assigning roles in a team, and then leave the tasks that the team needs to complete a little ambiguous. That helps short circuit some of the time that team members spend negotiating who's doing what's everybody's responsibilities, what's everybody's role, and kind of working through that. And that ambiguity in the tasks means they really need to focus on what are they doing, how are they going to accomplish their goals, and that really drives them to collaborate on that because they have to figure that out together and not just handed it on a silver platter. Ultimately, all of these strategies encourage the teams to form and collaborate. Intentional effort by leaders throughout your practice to help them take hold, encourage your employees to work together, solve problems collaboratively, thrive, and that helps both the employees individually and your entire practice. Whew. All right, we've covered a lot of ground about what teams are, why they're important, how they evolve, and how you can encourage them to form. In a few minutes here before we wrap up, I want to take you through a specific technique that I have used in the past to simultaneously improve team performance and contribute to the overall improvement of the organizations I've worked in. This technique is called a retrospective. It's a particular style of meeting designed to encourage participation by all team members and create actual change and improvement in their work and their team. It combines continuous improvement efforts, kind of similar to what you might think of as QI initiatives, with team building and development, which makes it a really powerful force for change and team development within your practice. Specifically, the retrospective focuses on 3 questions. What went well? What could have gone better? And what do we want to try differently in the future? In exploring these questions, the retrospective focuses on how the team is working its processes, and its culture, seeking to improve both gradually with complete team buy-in. So who should do the retrospectives? Pretty much any team within your practice could do these. If you're a larger practice, that might mean your front desk staff does one, the billing staff does one, the nurses do one, the physicians do one, etc. If you're a smaller practice and everyone is really just jumping in wherever they're needed all the time, you may have everybody involved and consider the entire practice at once. Really find what works for your team, for your practice, and feel free to adjust as you go. This is something that's really adaptable and works best as you figure out how it works for you. This might get a little too meta, but you can use the retrospective meeting format to analyze how your adoption of retrospectives is going. You know, a little like Inception style stuff going there, but it works. So keep that in mind. We're going to dig into each of those questions a little bit more and then talk about the logistics for running this meeting and hopefully still leave ourselves with enough time for a few questions at the end. The first topic that we discuss at a retrospective is positively focused. What went well since the last retrospective meeting? If you're familiar at all with appreciative inquiry and the ideas behind that, you'll recognize that focus on the positive here in the retrospective meeting. It really helps to start this meeting by recognizing the good aspects of the team. It's less threatening. It's also really easy to get bogged down in fixing problems and wallowing in negativity without ever recognizing the successes of the team. So it's really good to start with the positive first. We'll get to the negatives, and people are always good at coming up with problems. So coming up with the good stuff first helps set the tone of the meeting really well. To kick the meeting off, everybody participating, so that's everybody on the team, comes with their ideas for what went well since the last meeting. You can also set aside a few minutes at the start of the meeting for people to come up with their thoughts if people need a little bit of time to do that. Most importantly, those items that people come with should focus on how the team worked and how it achieved the positive outcomes. You know, for example, maybe the new in-car check-in process for visits during COVID-19 worked really well. The team should discuss each of those items one by one to understand how it came to be, what was behind it, why did it work well, and ideally come up with ideas for things they can do to continue building on that success and get more of it. How do we get more? What did we learn from that success? And what could we change to promote more of that behavior and more of that success? You know, again, that's the appreciative inquiry portion of how do we build on the positive that we're experiencing. Anything within the team's purview is fair game. What tools they're using, how they're dealing with conflict, how they're setting goals, anything like that, that is fair game for the team to look at and hear. And this is really the team's chance to reflect back on itself, pat itself on the back for where things are going well, and figure out how it can, you know, keep doing those things going forward. The next topic is a bit of a flip side of the first. What could have gone better since the last retrospective meeting? Now the team really dives into areas that weren't maybe as smooth as they would have liked. Same kind of idea as the first question. Everybody comes with their ideas that could have gone better since the last time. We spent a little time at the beginning of the meeting to come up with those. Items, again, should focus on how the team worked and how those bumpy patches came to be. You know, maybe there were a bunch of vaccines that had to be thrown out because parents decided to refuse the vaccine after it all had been drawn up. All right, that's a good thing to talk about. How did that come to be? What ideas might we have? Use that discussion to identify what changes might you do, what might you try differently to try to avoid that problem, how to fix that. Again, anything is within the purview, anything's fair game. Good chance for the team to look back, see where it can improve. The third topic of this meeting, what to try differently, is really where the rubber hits the road. The team's looking to identify things that they might do differently, try differently, change to either improve on their strengths or address some of the weaknesses they found in those what could have gone better discussions. You should identify as many things that you might want to try differently as possible. Anything, any ideas for a game, write it down, keep track of it. You're then going to select a few to try between the current meeting and the next meeting. In my experience, 2 to 4 items is reasonable, depending exactly on the team, the complexity of those items. But you want to pick some that are achievable and enough that you can get through. This the idea: small change, small bits, and you always come back and do more later. If you have more than you can try, keep a running list of those ideas. If you have a session where you're short on ideas of what to do, pull out that list, grab some off of it. Between those meetings, it's really important to check in on the items that you chose to work on and make sure progress is being made. So if your teams already have a daily or regularly scheduled status meetings, maybe your morning huddle, something like that, that can be a great time. Bring those items you want to change up twice a week, see how you're doing. If you don't have a regular status meeting, pick somebody on the team who will check on that status twice a week and communicate it to everybody on the team. So you can, again, keep tabs on how are you doing on these items you decided to work on for between meetings. It's also really important to review the outcome of each of these things you want to change at the start of the next meeting so you can figure out how it went. Did you make the progress you wanted to? Is it a change you want to keep in place? Do you want to tweak it again? Do you want to get rid of it? No, that didn't really work. We don't want to do it. Any of those are valid. This is really a chance to try, experiment quickly, and keep going. You're running close. I'm going to speed on through here. The agenda for a retrospective, what does that look like in action? High level, start the meeting by looking at those things to try differently from the previous meeting. What are you going to do with it? Keep it, change it, pitch it. As I said, anything that is valid, you're really trying to do small bites, try stuff out, experiment, see what works, keep what works, ditch what doesn't. It's a low commitment for each experiment just to get a chance to learn. That's okay. Then we're going to run through those 3 questions. What went well? What could have gone better? What do you want to try differently next time? Boom, boom, boom. That's the agenda. How do you organize this? Since most practices see everyone in person, it can really be as simple as a wall and some sticky notes. Make 3 columns on the wall for each of the main questions. What went well? What could go better? What to try differently? Each person in the group writes their thoughts down on stickies, presents them, and sticks them up on the wall. You talk about each item as they get stuck on the wall. I recommend doing it as each one is introduced. Nurse Amy says, I think this went really well. Everybody talks about it. You stick it up on the wall. You move on to the next one. It's a great time for the ideas to come up with what to try differently. Write them down on a sticky note as soon as they come up. Slap them up in the try differently column. This is intended to be a dynamic and interactive session. So get up, move around, move stickies around, discuss. That's all great. Some final logistics around this. The retrospective meetings are intended to allow your team to focus on improving itself. In order for that to work, everybody needs to feel comfortable speaking freely. So ironclad rule number 1, what happens in retrospectives stays in retrospectives. The conversations are not for consumption by anyone who is not involved. That includes the partners. They do not get to sit on these meetings if they are not part of the team. This is a time for the team to work on itself, and that's it. Nobody else needs to be involved in that. Retrospectives work best when they happen frequently. They're based on the principle of small improvements adding up over time. So meet often, make small changes, and things will add up way faster than you think. What's the right frequency I've used on the teams I've been on? It's been every 2 weeks was a really good rhythm. Much less than that, and you're spending a lot of time meeting, you don't have a lot of time to experiment. If you start going up to like once a month, it can be really tough to remember what happened a month ago. But every team, gets the freedom to adjust that schedule as they feel. It's often really helpful to have somebody facilitate. That person should be on the team who can help lead and guide the meeting, keep people on track. That can be the same person every week or rotate around the team. That's really up to the team to pick. And finally, time. How long does the meeting take? Early on, when you're first introducing this may take an hour and a half to 2 hours per session. People are going to have a lot of ideas because they haven't had a venue, may not have had a good venue before, and people are going to be getting used to the format. Most teams within a couple sessions I found settled into about an hour for the meeting once they really got the rhythm down and got the hang of it. So budget about an hour. All right, that was a ton. We're exactly at 3 o'clock. Session takeaways. Thriving employees make for thriving practices. You want to encourage that. High performance teams that help with thriving employees and help with your thriving practice are built. They don't just happen. You put some effort into it. And if you do that and you build this improvement throughout the retrospectives into your team culture, you can create thriving employees. Your practice will thrive, and overall you will be much more successful. A couple of quick references. There's a URL up here for a blog post about retrospectives. Full disclosure, I wrote it. There'll be a lot of, in a previous role, so there'll be a lot of overlap. The second is Harvard Business Review. There's tons of articles about building and managing teams. The 3 that I have on the slide here really informed this presentation a lot, but there are tons out there that are just as useful. Like $9 to get a print and totally worth the money. Related courses, there's a few that others have happened. Practice Culture by Jay Hart, Managing Through Change by Karen Stackpole, and Develop Your Practice Strategic Plan by Tim Rushford. They're all up on our YouTube channel, PCC's YouTube channel. Go check them out. We are 3:01. Are there any questions? I'm going. It's a little out of breath.
No, well done. You're not kidding. That is a ton of information. It's all great too. I haven't seen any questions in the general chat, but I did have a private conversation with a practice leader, a clinician leader, saying, this is just so much, I don't know where to begin. If you had a single takeaway from this, if you had to choose one high priority recommendation that you made, is there one that you would recommend to a clinician who's really just beginning to endeavor to create a team culture?
I personally think that trying to adopt that retrospective approach, because it's so grounded in little changes over time, trying a small thing, see how it works, and building is a great way to get started. All of the skills of teamwork, of being collaborative and working together and being civil are embedded in that process. And as you come up with the little ideas, you get the constant feedback of what is working, what isn't working, and you can build on that. And that will start to grow and blossom a team culture just by going through that process. So that's why I put that technique in there. I recommend it. I have been blown away the times I've been on other teams doing that and how effective it is. Yeah,
I've been really happy with PCC's adoption of that approach. We've been doing it for years now. It's so effective. There really is no replacement for collecting your thoughts, like really thoughtfully coming to something that a collective experience, and sharing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like you say, building on the things that went well is really one of the great strengths of it. One of my own bits of curiosity, do you have a quick description? There were two phrases or two terms that you used that I'm unfamiliar with: SMART goals, and I think the word was appreciative inquiry. Are there short descriptions of what each of those is?
Sure. Start with appreciative inquiry. It's really a whole school of thought around really focused on the building of strengths. A lot of business culture and leadership culture is around, how do we fix problems? How do we find a problem and fix it? How do we find a problem and fix it? And appreciative inquiry says, well, why don't we look at what our strengths are and how do we build up on those? How do we find what we're good at and leverage those to do better? So that's what that is. Tons of writing out there if you want to search for it. Champlain College here in Vermont has a whole center dedicated to appreciative inquiry. So great resources out there to check out around that.
Nice.
And then SMART goals are a framework for goal setting on how to create goals that you can achieve. And so those, 5 letters in there are all aspects that a good goal needs to have. And create a goal that checks all of those off. That's something that you have a much higher likelihood of being able to accomplish and succeed in achieving. Whereas if you're missing any of those, if you don't have a time date on it, it's easy to procrastinate. If you can't actually measure that you've done it, how do you know you're done or not? So there's a ton out there again online in the business world around setting and using SMART goals. They're great for teams. They're great for individuals, even in performance review time, or it's like, if somebody has a goal, they want to do something the next year, have them write it down in a SMART goal as part of performance evaluations.
Do it.
Come back and look at it.
This was really awesome, Alex. Thank you so much. And thanks for wrapping up the conference for us. This is a bittersweet moment that we've done it. We've been at this for weeks, and thank you to everyone that's been to all these sessions, and especially today to you, Alex. Thank you so much for all this content. That was an awful lot of great work.
Oh, thank you. And again, thanks to everybody who's been watching.
All right.
They're awesome. So we look forward to seeing you in person next week.
All right. It's hard to say goodbye, but I'm going to end the meeting. Bye.